and welcome to Multimedia Journalism, aka MMJ301. So what I want to do in this 10-minute presentation today is provide a thematic, tonal, and pedagogical overview of my course. Relative to the pedagogy, I will talk about how that relates to the technologies that I have chosen and how that relates to how I'm using some of the required elements in the course. Let's make this a little bigger. Relative to tone, what I want to do is just give you some sense for the course. So I'm reading this from my course page. Journalism is no longer confined to words. In today's digital world, the use of technology and the internet present new opportunities and tools for connecting words, data, images, sound, and motion to tell stories in increasingly compelling ways. Yes, the world of journalism has changed, but we have an advantage. We're new to the game. We don't have to unlearn the old ways, just embrace the new. Ready? Venture on. And so we shall. And spoiler alert, this is a iPad-based course, and as a result, I'm going to stick with screenshots rather than trying to dig into the course itself. Okay, first a little bit in terms of the inspiration for the course. The inspiration was a Lafayette College course called Visualizing Information, and this is a traditionally taught course at a residential college with undergrads. And it did have a variety of instructivist elements, particularly relative to how the necessary technologies were being utilized or taught. This is a course that I became involved with. It's a long story, but I kind of got a glorified internship working in this environment. And so I got a lot of firsthand experience. Now, when I set out to create my course, I wasn't seeking to just port this over and make it an online course. I really wanted to infuse it with connectivist elements because I thought that was particularly appropriate for the subject matter of multimedia journalism. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak to some of the elements of connectivism and how they play out in this course. One of the first big ideas is that the connectivists believe that learning and education was fundamentally changed with the arrival of the internet. In terms of both what was worth knowing and how we learned, that changed. And we're now in a situation of what they would call informational abundance. And in such an environment, they believe that it doesn't make any sense to have courses behind closed walls. So I am designing with the iTunes U Course Manager, which is a mobile platform, and it's an open educational resource. Right now, this is a 16-week based course, but eventually I hope to convert it into something that would be time independent as well. And what you're looking at is the catalog page in iTunes U, and you would enter into my course by clicking on the particular course, which is mine here on the left. Let me talk a little bit about what I'm using iTunes U for and what I'm not using it for. I am using it to convey all the course information, the syllabus type information, and I'm using it to introduce the various modules, describe the activities and assignments, and importantly, provide direct downloads of the apps that would be needed to create the various artifacts. But what I'm not using it for is to provide the core resources in the course. And this relates to another connectivist idea, which is they believe that the resources to be used in a course should be dynamic and have the ability to be influenced and shaped by the learners themselves. As such, I am using the social bookmarking service Pearltrees as the means to provide resources in the course. And what you're seeing on the right is a few weeks of the course, and each of those pearls are trees that can be dove into. So if I go into week 1, for example, I have further broken this down into activities associated with things you would need to learn, background type information. And then the orange signifies information that's related to the creation of the artifacts. And that would be more where you get into your tutorials and visual examples and things like that. Furthermore, if I keep drilling down, I'm using a color scheme where white always represents optional elements. And so there are tons of cool things that you can provide here, but by using the color scheme, it prevents a cognitive overload type situation, or hopefully so. Now, I spoke to about the idea of learners helping to shape the resources. Well, one aspect of this is this idea of helping to grow the tree. So on a rotating basis, small group basis, you would be responsible. So if I have a unit about developing map-based stories and it's your group's turn, you would be responsible for identifying examples that would be appropriate for the rest of us to analyze. And in that way, you're contributing directly to the tree. So it's kind of like the DDO, if I pronounced that right, but it's kind of a slightly different twist on the topic. Another connectivist concept is this idea of feeding the network, or always making the network more intelligent. And one of the ways you can do that with Pearl trees is any resource that you access, you have the ability to add your thoughts and commentary. And hopefully in this way, we start to weed out resources that perhaps are weaker than others and help identify stronger resources. Another way that I'm sort of feeding the network on a smaller basis is there is polling or surveying that is going on throughout the course, not just at the end. So relative to the technologies that are being utilized and the artifacts, and how difficult did you find this to create? Do you have alternate technologies that you would have suggested to do this with? So that goes on throughout. And then Typeform is the application for the polling. And that does double duty because they also use Typeform to develop surveys that they use in their own courses to get feedback from their blogging audience. Another connectivist concept is to use free Web 2.0 technologies rather than premium services. And so to give you an example here, with Lafayette, they have a subscription to sound slides. But when it comes to doing our photo or slideshows, we're using something called WeVideo because it provides free access. Similarly, Lafayette has access to ArcGIS, which is a high-end mapping situation or program. We're going to use a free thing called StoryMap. So it's identifying resources that you would be able to use in the real world. Another idea is that you should learn from many voices. That's a key connectivist idea. So there is Skyping that goes on in this course. And again, this would be a small group element where they would be responsible for identifying appropriate questions and then also setting up and monitoring a back channel as the Skyping happens, and also ensuring that there is some live audience for the Skype, because this is a asynchronous course in general. Also, the many voices relates to these, we're using tutorials that are sourced from the web. These are not, all clean, perfect, same voice, lynda.com, or all coming from the voice of the instructor. So they have to learn that in the real world, you have to learn from a bunch of different variety and sources. So my Flipboard tutorial comes from Church Magazine, and the GarageBand comes from, I think, some 15-year-old kid. So, you have to learn all these different ways. And then the other key change in the course is they really have to learn, they have to self-teach themselves the technologies. I believe it was Papert who said, every time you teach somebody something, you deprive them of the thrill and satisfaction of learning it themselves. And that's very much feeding how I feel and how I'm doing this. Another concept is in the instructive and a connectivist course, the instructor is not really an instructor. You're a fellow node in the network. And so you are leading by example and really being a peer. So all the activities that I am asking the learners to do, I am doing at the same time. So one of the first activities is to create a digital business card. And you can see that I've created mine. I would upload that. Another example is later on, after they have their RSS feeds set up, they have to use those feeds to curate a Flipboard magazine. So, and again, they would be doing this all against a topic of their choosing. My topic is Jonathan Carroll, who happens to be one of my favorite magical realism type authors. So, later on, you have to create a word cloud. So I took things from my RSS feed and created a word cloud, and then a video or a photo story. And these are all things that would be in the course. Let me speak to some of I did a lot of research into where connectivist courses go wrong. And the key things are cognitive overload and feelings of disconnection. And so I have strayed. This is by no means a purist connectivist pedagogy. I am making use of small groups, which the connectivists are generally against because they believe that creates groupthink. But it is important to offset some of the chaos here with some social connections. So one of my synchronous elements early on is there is a video chat, online video chat between the various group members using uvu and also involving me, the instructor, where you talk about things that you're excited about and you talk about what it is that you have most concerns about. So you're getting some of this concerns, putting it out all on the table. The connectivists very much believe in using weak threads, that you don't have to have strong personal relationships to get to information. And while that's important, it's got to be offset with strong social threads. Along that way too, there is a voice thread activity very early on where you're supposed to tell a key event in your life as a personal news story, and you accompany that with a bit strip image. And again, what I'm trying to do is get everybody to know each other. So everybody in the small group would have to respond to one another. And also what I'm doing here is, I'm showing some sensitivity, or, that I'm one of them, and that, look, I have fears too about, a love-hate relationship with technology, and I'm communicating that along the way. So more with that peer type relationship. Just a couple more things in terms of where I kind of modified the pedagogy. Connectivists don't really believe in closed or private communities. Again, but I felt like we do a lot of things in this course that are out in the real world. They have blogs that are out in the real world. So I felt it was okay to offset that with some private elements where we have a Google Plus community where we can do discussions, have weekly discussions, but they can also talk about the various technologies and post tips and, concerns, headaches, whatever. So there's definitely an active community that I'm building here, and the small group element is carried throughout. Each of the discussions, you have to respond minimally to your small group, and then you're welcome to go beyond that. So, very much trying to set a sense of community and having them connect to each other as much as they're connected to me as the instructor, because I actually think it's more important that they're connected to each other and have a sense of being able to help each other out. Just last couple things. There are some other things that I do to offset cognitive load. You saw some of the design with Pearl trees, but let me just say something about the first two things. In a true connectivist environment, you probably are allowed to use any technology you want. What I'm doing is identifying a lead technology. So like on a photo story, I'm identifying WeVideo. If you're an expert in iMovie, you can do it in iMovie, but we're going to provide tutorial resources for WeVideo. So it's kind of a middle ground, not a purist vision, but, doing what we need to have a pragmatic vision that, where learners succeed. Finally, on evaluation, relative to the student side, because in real life, as journalists, you're evaluated on your artifacts or the quality of your stories. That's the majority of the grade here. There is a small grade relative to discussion participation, but no tests, no quiz. And then relative to how the evaluation of the course, I'm really focusing in my evaluation plan on the connectivist elements, because this is a course that existed beforehand and was vetted. So really what I want to focus on is what I've kind of recast or changed. And so with each passing artifact and use of technology, I'm asking about what the experience was. Do you think it was necessary? Could you use other technologies? Trying to get that feedback, and then doing that throughout, again, to kind of express that idea of they're shaping the course as much as I'm shaping the course. And that's the quick overview of the course.